Hey everyone, it's John Morley, and welcome once again to my channel, Positive Vibrational Waves. And thank you once again for stopping by, for sharing it, for liking it, and for clicking the subscribe, and also the bell notification icon that is located on the lower bottom right of the screen. So, what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, tonight I thought we would give you a technique to actually improve the quality of your life. I speak to a lot of people every day, personally and in business. And sometimes I hear from them, John, I just can't remember that. I just, I can't remember anything. I can't remember the things I need to remember for work. Now, I'm not talking about phone numbers because that's a little different. We could talk about that another time. I'm referring more to simple facts or maybe things you need to remember that are part of your job. Or maybe when you go shopping, you have a list. And wouldn't it be nice to actually not have to write that list down? Well, let's talk about this from a very high level, which is that you're very intelligent. You just don't realize how intelligent you are. Well, see, our brain actually doesn't think in words or sentences, even though that's how we communicate with other people. That's not how our brain works. Our brain actually uses a different language, it thinks in pictures. So, how do we make the brain remember something? We create a picture of the situation. Let's say I want to go shopping, and I'm going to go shopping, and before I go, I'm going to say that I need to have a gallon of milk. Okay? So, let's picture the gallon of milk on top of your head. Okay? Just picture the gallon of milk just on top of your head. I also need a loaf of bread. So, on top of the gallon of milk, you'll see this big loaf of bread just sort of teeter-tottering on the gallon of milk. And that's the second thing you need. The next thing I need to pick up is, I don't know, let's say I need to pick up eggs. So I have the gallon of milk. It's actually, let's say it's the white gallon of milk. You can picture that it has the blue cap, depending on whether you want the 1%, 2%, etc. On top of that cap is the loaf of bread, okay? And on top of the loaf of bread, I need eggs. So what I'm going to do on top of that loaf of bread is I'm going to put eggs, but I'm actually going to put them in the word of eggs. So on top of the loaf of bread, I actually see eggs written out with like the white or yellow eggs. So now you can see that, right? Well, in addition to that, I also need some cheese to making grilled cheese sandwiches. So I'm going to picture the cheese. I'm going to picture the sliced cheese, whether you get Velveeta or whatever you buy. And I'm going to picture the cheese actually right on top of the eggs. I'm going to picture them almost like if you ever played cards. I'm going to kind of picture them like two little teepees, kind of just holding together. And then I'm gonna make two of those, and then on top of that, I'm gonna put one slab of cheese on top. So again, I've got my milk, okay, which is very easy to remember. On top of my milk, remember I have the teetering bread. On top of the bread, I have my eggs, written the word eggs, right? On top of the eggs, I have two little teepees with a little slab of cheese on top, all made out of cheese. What else do I need? I don't know. Let's say I need to get something for dinner. Maybe I need to get some spinach. Okay, great. So the last thing that we talked about was the cheese. So what I'm going to do is around the teepees, I'm going to put spinach grass all around the teepees, kind of making up the yard of the teepee. Okay? What else do I need? Well, let's say I need to make my dinner. I may need some, I don't know, what do I need for dinner? I need some oregano. So I can picture the spice of oregano, okay? I can picture maybe in that little grass, I can picture, I don't know, I can picture maybe a table, okay? And on that table, I'll see this great big jar, not a small, but a big jar, and the word oregano written right up it in red and green, Italian style, just with the little red, white, and green. And I can see that big oregano just sitting on this table. In addition to the oregano, I also need to pick up some ice cream. So just on top of the table, okay, next to that great big spinach, I see, I see myself sitting at the table and this great gigantic bowl of ice cream. And I want coffee ice cream, so I picture the coffee ice cream in this great big bowl, and I have this spoon that is almost as big as my arm, and I'm having such a job scooping the ice cream up so that I can, basically it comes up to my mouth, I can just about touch a tiny bit of it just to get a tiny bit to my mouth, which is a lot of ice cream, but I'm just getting that little edge, and that's probably equal to maybe like a tablespoon. This is a massive, massive spoon that I'm eating this ice cream with. And finally, I also need to pick up a box of toothpicks. So now what I'm going to imagine is, let's say, just above the table, I see a kite flying. And attached to it, I see a string with a big, big pack of toothpicks. Okay? So how does this work? Well, first of all, what was the first thing I asked you to remember? Gallon of milk, right? You know what kind of milk it is because you know the color of the cap, depending on your store, etc., respectively. On top of the milk, you have this great big, the bread, right? On top of the bread, what do you have next? Eggs. Picture the eggs, right? You're already seeing this in your mind. Top of the eggs, we have the TP, okay, made of cheese. All right, so we need to get cheese, right? And around the TP, what do we have? Spinach, so I need to pick up a bag or two of spinach. I then have a table. And on the table is this great big Italian, almost like jar, red, white, and green, and it says oregano on it. Oh, I guess I got to pick up a thing of oregano. Next to that, I see this great big bowl, right? And there's a spoon as big as my hand. What's that? The ice cream. What was the last thing? The toothpicks. You see, you really are very intelligent. It's just that you have to know how to speak the language. So if you understand how to speak the language, somebody else can understand you. If you were talking French or Italian and they didn't understand that, then you'd have to translate it. So that's really all it is, and the reason that why many of us can't seem to believe that we can remember things is that we're communicating in the wrong language. That's really all it is. There's nothing complicated about it. When you put the words and you translate them into pictures, our brain says, I get it, I get it, I get it. So how can this help you? Well, it can help you because when you attach things to things you already know, that's very helpful. But the other thing we did is, you notice we made things kind of funny and kind of crazy. We made them more ridiculous. The more ridiculous you make something, the easier it is to remember it. Okay, the more your brain can actually get a picture of what's going on. And I could ask you, what was the third thing that I asked you to remember? So right away, you see that picture in your head. I don't even have to tell it to you, right? And you see the first thing, and then the second thing, and was the thing, oh, it was a carton of eggs. See how easy you did that? And you don't have to memorize anything. You can do stuff like that. It's really amazing. In fact, what I find really fascinating is memory. So what I figure we're going to do is we're going to dedicate a few sessions to memory. The first memory we're going to talk about is this one, which is how to help you memorize things like for a list. Okay? The next thing I want to talk about is going to be memorization of people's names. How do you remember somebody's name? Well, I know sometimes it's embarrassing when you don't remember somebody's name. You say, gee, well, what's your name again? One thing you can do when you meet someone, okay, is to stop and pause. Maybe notice something about them, a characteristic, etc. Maybe the name was Tom, or whatever the name was, or Mary. And as you get the person's name, you say, okay, your name is Tom. And how are you spelling that? Tom. And really focus on that. Maybe seeing the T, the O, and the M in your mind. And you might say something like, you met them, and maybe you'll say something like, what type of work do you do? And maybe Tom says he is a carpet installer. So you can immediately picture Tom putting a great big piece of carpet, okay? And he's actually putting it in, and it spells the word Tom. Later on to the right, you see this lady, and her name is Jill. So how do you remember Jill? Well, I don't know what her husband's name is. Her husband's name isn't Jack, let's just say, or some others not Jack. But I know that Jack and Jill went up the hill, right? So for a pail of water. So I picture Jill holding this great big bucket and going up the mountain with Jack. So now I remember that her name is Jill. We know Tom because the carpet installer. Next to Tom is Brian. Brian is actually an air pilot. How are we going to remember that? Well, as I'm flying in his plane that he is actually piloting, I see the name of his airlines on the outside of the plane. Brian Sun Airlines. And you're probably saying, gee, John, how does this work and how do you do this when you don't have a lot of time? Well, you just have to make deductions really quickly and get your mind to think on your feet. That's really all it is. If you can get your mind to think on your feet, you're going to seem like the most intelligent person in the world. It's practice. Just like you practice to work out, to do push-ups, whatever it is you're doing, you're practicing. So when you practice this muscle up here, just like with visualization, memory, your memory muscle actually can get better, and it will get better. You just have to practice. Maybe you're studying for school, or you're going back to college and you just want to get more education. Maybe you're working on completing your degree, or you're getting your master's or your PhD. So what do? Maybe you're reading a story, or you're reading this book, but the book doesn't really interest you, but you need to know it for your class. So how do you memorize that? Well, one thing I tell you to do is throw away the highlighter pen, because the only thing that does is keep the highlighting companies in business and help their stock. But what should you do? Well, think about the paragraph. Think about what it's about, okay? And try to maybe take a moment or two with a little pad and write down 2 or 3 things about that paragraph. Maybe think about the person in the paragraph, what they're saying, what they're doing, and try to picture them where they are. Let's say there's a paragraph of somebody teaching you how to, I don't know, make shoes for whatever, just pick something arbitrarily. Or paint a house. But you don't know anything about that. So now, when you get to these steps, you have to install things in your head by picturing yourself, but making it really ridiculous. So the first thing when you paint is you have to go to the store and you have to select a color. So you can see this great big color wheel spinning around and something that says, pick your color. So you're going to remember the first step. The second thing maybe you have to do is you have to decide how much paint you're going to need, right? Once you decide how much paint you need, now you need to figure out what that's going to translate into. So square footage, how that's going to translate into gallons. How does square feet translate into gallons? So you figure that out. Once you've got that information, so you've got your spinning wheel, how do you calculate? Maybe you picture this great big measuring stick. And maybe it's really weird because it's to get an area, okay? You take the formula, you can just picture this 4 times the side to get the area, and you could picture 4 great big rulers just measuring the room. And then in the center, you actually get the square footage. So you get the area square footage. So that's one way if you were doing it, just to give an example of the formula or whatever your formula is. And then after you do that, the next thing you may need to do is you have to, beside buying the paint, you have to remember to get rollers. So maybe one of the things you can see is you can see these gigantic rollers. They're probably as big as you, and you have to get maybe 3 or 4 of them, and you get these great things. In fact, you can picture yourself just trying to get them in your car. They're so hard, you don't know how you're going to get these rollers in your car. And then the next thing might be after that is after, you picture maybe somebody or this great big, let's say, what has a lot of air in it. Maybe we can get a gorilla, and we can have a gorilla blowing air on the walls to dry it. Now, I know this is really stupid, but you have to realize something. You see, your brain doesn't really know what it's doing. It just knows to associate things. So a lot of times people think that they don't have a good memory or they're not smart. It's none of those things. It's that we were not taught basically the body's 101 understanding of how our body communicates. And when I share a lot of these things with you and about other stuff in life, you're going to be like, oh, I get it. Just like now you all can remember what was the first thing I asked you to remember in the market? Milk. What was the last thing I asked you to remember in the market? The very last thing. The toothpicks. How'd you remember? It was flying on the kite. So you see, you're really good at this. And I think if you practice just a little bit each day, you're going to find that the practice helps you. So you remember I told you about the universe being all energy and waves? Well, when you do that gratitude thing that I've shared with you, and a lot of stuff I teach you is cumulative, when you do the gratitude thing every day, your muscle of being appreciative and understanding reality and starting to be grateful is now opened up, and now you've attuned that muscle, and now you're focusing on things that are positive. And it works. I mean, this is just so unbelievable, but it works. And so when you just start to believe a little bit, that's why I tell somebody when you're trying to manifest something, if you're having a challenge, try to manifest something very small. Maybe it's manifesting a cup of coffee or a drink or some water, or maybe you want to manifest a penny or a quarter, okay? And something as simple like, I see myself picking up a quarter. And what's going to happen? Your brain is just going to draw you to situations that are going to basically give you a quarter. So how does that work? It's when you have enough numbers of something, then things sort of happen. The problem is our mind actually shuts down because it doesn't believe that it's going to find something. So it says, oh, I haven't seen it here. I haven't seen it here. There's no quarter. Yeah, so your brain just shuts down and says, but there is going to be a quarter. There is going to be the situation. You're just going to be too close-minded to actually act upon it. So this is how I'll call it the magic of the mind works. And it's not magic. It is a way of you getting to understand perceptions. Because remember Dr. Wayne Dyer, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. You can apply it to everything in your life. So we've learned a lot about memory today, and we've also learned about the fact about remembering people's names. Did you know that the most pleasant sound for someone to hear is their name? If you like someone's name, one thing you can do is you can compliment them. Rebecca, Kim, Ariella. So you say, well, gee, that's a very nice name. Or Senquintessa, that is an amazing name. First of all, how do you spell that name? That's amazing. What, if I may ask, how do you think your mom came up with that name? Well, we were in the forestry business, and they give you some story. So when you become interested in somebody else, they open up to you. When you have a story to tie to a picture, guess what you do? You remember that picture even more than just making that wonderful picture in your mind. You see, pictures tell stories. And when you have a picture and you start to make connections with it, the neuroplasticity of the brain causes that picture to have a resemblance and a connection to you. And thus your brain connects and creates these different brain pathways to allow you to remember things. Isn't that amazing? Now, we just did something like this in short term, but the actual long term of things happen when you sleep. They go from your short term to your long term, but that's a discussion for another day. So I thought memory was really important. So what's another way or something else maybe you need to remember? So we talked about, process. How else can you memorize things? Well, one way that a lot of people do this, including authors, including speakers, they use something called a mnemonic device. Let me give you an example. We all learned the famous, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Right? What was that? "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Some of you may say, "Oh, gee, that's back in grammar school, it's back in school, or it's back in class, and I don't know, it was some subject I didn't like." But what was it about? "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Well, it was math class, wasn't it? It was when you were learning algebra. It was the order of operations that you need to follow when you evaluate any expression. I promised I wouldn't get into engineering here, and I wouldn't get into how to solve equations. But just to understand nothing more than the flow, P stands for parentheses, okay? E stands for exponents. M stands for multiplication. D stands for division. A stands for addition. So that doesn't seem very complicated because now you know it. But if I ask somebody to just remember this, they're like, how do you do that? So by having a mnemonic device, it gives you the confidence, and now it allows you to link something, whether it's words, the situation, but it's letters, and then the letters get linked to words. So what's another mnemonic device? Maybe one is all cars eat gas, or all cows eat grass. So what is that? What is that? Or girls bake dates for Anna. What is that? Any of you in music, does this ring a bell? We're using mnemonic devices there. All cars eat gas, or all cows eat grass, is actually the spaces for notes in the F clef of music. Okay? And FACE is the spaces in the G clef. Pretty easy, right? So Girls Bake Dates for Anna is actually the lines in the F clef, which is played in the left hand usually. And in the right hand, okay, the right side is, what was it? Every good boy does fine, or every good boy deserves fudge. Those are the lines in the G clef. So you see, you just remembered in music, they got you to remember this very easy, maybe in one class or two. You were able to immediately take that mnemonic device and remember your spaces in the F clef and the G clef and the lines in the F clef and the G clef, all by this device, which has been used for years. And it helps everyone learn their spaces and their lines. Why? So you can now learn the notes. Once you learn the notes, you're able to play the notes on whatever instrument you have. So one thing that helps our memory is if you're trying to learn something, I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say you wanted to do engineering. Now, we're not going to get into engineering, but let's say you wanted to do engineering. But you had no basis for what engineering was even about. Let's take electrical engineering. You don't know anything about circuits or anything about wires. But what's one thing I know that everybody probably does know about? Well, everybody knows that when you're home and you flip a switch up, a light comes on. You flip the switch down, the light goes off. What do we all know? We all know that that switch is turning on and off a light. Okay, so now that you understand that's a switch, great, now I can build upon that. So a switch, to cause the light to come on, it actually needs power. So we use a device which we call wires, and the wires connect from the switch to the power, okay? And then from the power back to the switch to the light and reverse back. So basically the way it starts off is, so if you just had a light connected to, let's say, a power source, a battery, electric, etc., when you have the two leads connected, the light comes on. That's what the switch does. So what we're doing is we're basically taking the switch and putting it in between one of the sides, and when you flip the switch up, it causes the contacts to be together. When you flip the switch down, the contacts are broken. So now, just by me explaining that to you, you understand now how the wiring works. You understand that. Okay, so now that you understand how the wiring works, and you understand that that's how it works, and you understand that electricity has to flow, okay? It has to flow through the wires from the positive side to the negative side, right? Negative to the positive has to flow around. Yeah, and now that happens. So what else do I want to teach you about it? Well, something else interesting to know about is the fact of, we learned about a switch, learned about a power source, but now something that I may want to build upon is the concept of having multiple switches. Okay, so you know what a switch is, you know what a wire is. So what is a three-way switch? Now let's forget about the number three-way. I'm not going to get into that. It has to do with the number of wires. But let's just take the very simplistic point that a switch, okay, turns on a light in one location. If we have another location, okay, there's another wire fed, but I'm not going to get into how that works. And that other switch means that the light can be turned on at two locations. But there's something else you need to know. So we know that's what a switch does. But when we have two switches, okay, well, sometimes call it a three-way, that means you could turn the light on from either location on or off. But you see how easy that was? If I just started to tell you, and I just started going and say, well, gee, you know, when you have multiple switches, and you had nothing to base it on, you'd be like, what's he talking about? Or I started talking to you about, okay, now, when this is how it works, and this is how it's all connected, and then when we change this, you'd be like, where is he going with this? I don't even understand. I know we have switches at home, but you see, I related something you knew about. Let me give you a bad example. Let's say you were painting. You knew nothing about painting. And when you go to class, the instructor would say something like, okay, pick up your brush. We know what a brush is. And take the luminance of the colors and create a 10% color degree between your C, M, Y, K major colors. You look at that and you're like, unless you did graphic design, you're like, what the heck is he talking about? But if I came to you and said, okay, so we all got our paintbrush, right? Very similar to anybody here painted a house before? Okay, you have. So, or done finger painting. So now we're just using a brush so we don't have to, we're older, we don't have to get our fingers dirty, but we can still have fun. And this is the adult way of having fun without using our fingers. And it's also a lot quicker to clean up. So we had a little fun, we get you to understand that. But what else is it? It's simple. It's that now I'm like, take the brush. Okay, great. Take your primary colors, which is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and take a little bit of each color. Now what I want you to do is I want you just to mix each primary color, okay, with the color next to it, and get it so that it's just a shade or two darker than what it is, or shade or two lighter. That makes sense, right? Because you have something, you have a benchmark point, you have something to go on. And I think this is the most important thing, is that when somebody talks to you, they have to understand that if you're not getting something, a lot of times it's not you, it's how it's being presented. In college, they say if you want to take a 300 or 400 level course, your prerequisite has to be the 100 or the 200 level course. And you're like, why is that? Well, it's very simple. In order to take an advanced calculus class, you have to have certain background in math. You have to have certain logic. So in order to have that, just like in engineering, you have to have digital circuits. And if you don't have these prerequisites, then you can't take the advanced course like differential equations. I'm just giving you an example. Or let's say advanced programming, because now you don't understand logic. And what's software about? Logic. And if you don't understand enough math, then you're not going to understand the computations required to make the calculations for a program of what you're trying to do, because that's what is required for that curriculum. So by understanding that there are prerequisites, those prerequisites, okay, are giving you the base foundation. Remember, a prerequisite will always build on what it is you know. So if you're going into a class, I'm like, I don't know anything about technology, I don't know anything about computers, I don't know anything about painting, I don't know anything about mechanics, okay? Like, I'm not a mechanical engineer, I'm an electrical data engineer. So how do I get somebody to understand mechanics? Well, I first have to get them to understand the basic principles. So one principle might be, do you know the difference between a pulley? Okay, let's talk about a pulley. So what's a pulley? A pulley is a device, let's keep it very simple, that usually a wire or string will be around, and it allows you to, using its force, you're able to take the force, so you're using less force and causing the pulley to take the rest of it while it harnesses the rest. So you're basically having a 50-50 weight, and you're able to pull that pulley with a lot less effort because it has the wheel and it's able to take that weight as you're just pulling just a little bit because it's holding a lot of it. So that's one thing. So that's one point. So now you understand that. Maybe the next point you may want to know something about is a gear. Okay? So you may, well, I don't know what a gear is. Okay, well, have you ever seen a wheel before in a car? Or have you ever seen anything ever turn? Maybe a fan or something like that. You ever seen that? Okay, well, that fan goes around. Now, that fan is a really big fan. But a lot of times we need to use another motor to drive, let's say, a smaller fan, a smaller blade, and then that blade will spin something that allows this other bigger one to spin, and it does that because it's a lot more efficient than just spinning the bigger one, okay? So that, just giving you an example. But you see, once you have a prerequisite, or you have a, let's call it a good solid foundation, you can learn anything. But you have to link what it is that you want to know to something you already know. And again, I could do this in any industry you're talking about. Electrical, mechanical, anything. We could even do it into construction. Well, let's give an example there. Well, I don't know how to build a house. Okay. So when you talk about foundation, it's funny, but we're actually talking about building a house. But let's say we're building a house, and now I'm trying to explain to you the steps. You're like, oh, I don't know why they have to do that. Well, the reason they have to do that is really simple. So when you start out, let's say in the morning, and you get ready for work or for school, what do you have to do? You have to get up, right? Have breakfast, or maybe you need to get undressed, take your shower, but you have to get undressed first before you can take the shower. You're not going to get in the shower first and just throw water on yourself. Well, I don't think you're going to, hopefully not. So the same process in this is that, why are we changing that? Well, we're changing this because every day we need to get at the clean part, but to get at the clean part, we need to first take the old covering off first before we put, so we can compare that to that. So do you see how we're doing this? And as you get the concept, you can just apply this to anything you want to learn about. So if there's anything you want to learn about, before you try to learn it, see if there is a commonality, some thread of it with something else. Because everything in our world started for something. And everything that starting from a very simple thought. And the simple thought allowed it to build upon other things. When we try to build the Taj Mahal or build the Mona Lisa without having any understanding of what the Mona Lisa needed or its composition, we're going to fail. And it's not because we're not smart or anything like that. It's because the brain doesn't have anything to stick it to. Have you ever taken, let's see, one of these stickers, or one you had to, put glue on the backing, and then you had to put it onto a wall or something? What happens if you don't have enough glue on there? It's not going to stick. Think of your foundation as glue. The better your foundation, the faster, quicker, and more reliably that your object is going to stick. And in this case, the more reliably and the faster your brain is going to form synapses and connections from one side of the hemisphere to the other side, and vice versa, to allow it to create those pathways. Now, I know we went into a lot, and today wasn't a relaxation session, and we did go a little bit over, but I hope this was really interesting for you. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about another area of memory. I'm not going to tell you what it is today, but it's something that's really going to help you, especially if you give presentations, and you're just wondering, how do you give a presentation? All right. My name is John Morley, and I really want to thank you very much for tuning into positive vibrational vibes with me every day. And again, please click on the subscribe icon there at the bottom, and also on the bottom right, the little bell notification icon. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your colleagues that if you're looking to get a more positive outlook on life, and you're looking to find the tools that are intangible, things you can't touch with your own hands, then you need to tune into positive vibrational waves daily. So with that, I want to wish you all a very good day and night, and let you know and hope that all of your days, all your nights, and all your minutes will be filled with the most tranquility, and take all those waves of positivity, and take any wave that you ever see that might have a little bit of negativeness in it, and just change the way you look at it. For a second, step back and realize that just by changing the way you're looking at it, it's going to change. And when it changes, you're going to have a completely different realization. And the realization is going to be, I can do this. Remember, what you say and what you think is what becomes your reality. It's that simple. Again, I'm John Morley, and thank you so much for tuning in to Positive Vibrational Waves, and I'll see you real soon.